Lately, I've been revisiting an absolute childhood classic, Courage the Cowardly Dog. A Cartoon Network animated series created by John R. Dilworth that I'm sure many of you are quite familiar with. For those out there that just aren't or didn't grow up with this show, Courage the Cowardly Dog is a comedy horror series. It follows a small pink dog named Courage who was abandoned as a puppy and rescued by a sweet elderly lady named Muriel and her old bastard of a husband, Eustace. They live out in the middle of nowhere, like literally. The town they live in is actually fucking called Nowhere. It's basically a barren wasteland that is particularly prone to supernatural, oftentimes very unsettling phenomena. And as every good dog does, Courage takes it upon himself to protect his often oblivious owners against these evil forces despite his cowardly nature. It was a pretty great show. It was definitely a pretty huge source of nightmare fuel, but that was sort of part of the appeal. The children have always sort of yearned for that type of shit, you know? That's why Goosebumps and the rest of the baby's first horror content gets so damn popular. But I've always felt that Courage was really something special. The setup, the setting, the characters, and of course the endless, dark, surreal moments and imagery that have always captivated me and kept me coming back. So imagine my surprise as I went to revisit this show on streaming this year, only to discover a new piece of Courage the Cowardly Dog media released in 2021. Nearly 20 fucking years after the show ended. And arguably even more insane than that, it is a classic straight to DVD and digital Scooby Doo crossover. Your ears are not deceiving you. This actually exists. And after discovering that, I pretty much immediately knew I wanted to make a video on this. Although I'm no super fan of either franchise, I do love Courage, and I am certainly a certified Scooby Doo enjoyer. So I'm incredibly excited and even more curious to see what this crossover has to offer. Like my other review recap style videos, we will be going through the entire movie. So, spoilers ahead for a direct-to-DVD and digital movie that you probably just discovered existed. But now, let's jump right into Straight Outta Nowhere, Scooby Doo meets Courage the Cowardly Dog. Yep, that's the title. The movie opens on the mystery gang at a bank as we are flung straight into the ending of a classic Scooby Doo adventure. Scooby and Shaggy interrupt this to tell everyone about a self-help course they're taking on their smartphone. Them having an iPhone in general is a little jarring to me for some reason. Anyway, things really kick off as whenever Velma starts her classic explanation dump, Scooby-Doo hears something that begins to drive him crazy, ultimately causing him to absolutely haul ass the fuck out of there. The gang literally wastes no time in going after him, leaving the clown behind to face zero justice for his actions, I guess. Despite how somewhat skeptical I am of the crossover aspect of this movie, I do have to admit I've always really enjoyed the Scooby-Doo cast. There is just something so comforting about these guys, not to mention that all their voices still retain all their classic charm. Special shout out to my man Matthew Lillard, the voice of Shaggy. He always pours his soul into every line he is given, like the producers have a gun trained on him at all times. Anyway, despite the mystery gang being in their van and not having any significant delay, Scooby still somehow outruns them, eventually finding himself in the middle of nowhere, again, literally, and within view of a very familiar little house. The movie then cuts to inside where we are shown Courage and Eustace watching TV as Courage is also having an episode. As you can probably imagine, Eustace does not give a singular fuck about this and proceeds to scare the shit out of him like usual. Courage then stumbles out the door and comes face to face with Scoob. They quickly bond over the fact that they're both dogs and that they're hearing a weird noise that is causing them to act erratically. They laugh about it briefly, and the ground begins shaking thanks to these huge bugs that are emerging from the soil. The entire movie then halts for a opening credit intro thing. I'll admit, it's been a hot minute since I've sat down and watched a Scooby Doo movie, so I don't know if this is a standard affair for those, or if this is just a special thing they did for this crossover in particular. Either way, it's super fun and I like it a lot, but it probably should have been at the very beginning rather than cut in like this. When we finally make it back to the movie, Courage and Scooby are completely surrounded by the bugs, only to be rescued by the mystery machine that just starts mowing them down. The dogs don't initially realize it's the mystery gang and are quite scared of these ominous silhouettes closing in. But sadly, that suspense isn't built up for the audience as well, as we've already seen it's the Mystery Machine, and, these characters have such iconic silhouettes. Like, holy shit, who could that be? Velma reveals that those bugs were supposedly just freakishly large cicadas. Scooby and Shaggy reunite, and Muriel invites them all inside for some freshly baked cookies. All the while, a mysterious, even larger bug lurks just out of view. Inside the home, this crossover officially has, crossed over. We sure do have the characters from Scooby Doo standing in the fucking Courage the Cowardly Dog house. This movie is such a fever dream. I can't believe that sentence just left my mouth. It is at this point when it becomes a bit jarring art direction-wise. Both series maintain their respective art styles, and honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way, but they are vastly different. Scooby-Doo has always had very normal, human-like designs, similar to something you'd see in a Golden Age comic book. And from what I personally remember, most Scooby-Doo crossovers usually have the guests drawn in this style, or at least center around characters that lend themselves a little more to it. Nothing quite as cartoony and exaggerated as Courage's art style. It's just crazy to imagine that these two motherfuckers exist in the same universe now. Is that how fucking Scooby-Doo lore works? Anyways, Courage and Scooby are then tasked with unclogging a sink as the gang tells Muriel about what they do. During this conversation, a gross piece of hair that was backing up the sink randomly turns into a giant monster that the Courage the Cowardly Dog wiki has named the Hostile Hairball. Does this have any effect on the plot so far? Nope. Courage and Scooby just fight with it for a minute before defeating it, with nobody in the room even acknowledging any of it. The funniest part being that Fred, Daphne, and maybe even Velma are in full view of it and say absolutely nothing. Courage does end up getting pretty concerned while looking at Shaggy, revealing that one of those bugs was on Shaggy's back. I guess for the entire time that he was in the house. Shaggy absolutely loses his shit before being saved by Muriel, who whacks the fuck out of it. By the way, there is absolutely no explanation later as to why that specific cicada did that. Shaggy, who was visibly shaking in the corner, goes and listens to another episode of their self-help fucking podcast thing. Courage tries to trauma dump on everyone.
Like I totally don't understand a word you're saying, little pink dude.
And then there is a loud knock at the door. Upon answering, no one is there. Just a single envelope was left behind. And it's not just any letter. It's an invitation inviting them all to have dinner at the mayor's mansion. Despite how random this is, and the fact that neither Muriel or Eustace even knew there was a mayor of nowhere, they all waste no time in heading that way. Muriel chooses to ride with the mystery gang, and Eustace gets stuck driving the dogs in his old jalopy. Shenanigans immediately ensue as Eustace seemingly phases out of existence entirely, and a giant 7-foot-tall cicada appears in the driver's seat and steals the car with Courage and Scooby inside. A very long, drawn-out, and surprisingly action-packed car chase then kicks off, which ends with Eustace's truck flying off a fucking cliff. The bug simply flies away, Courage and Scooby work together to narrowly escape, and Eustace spawns back in just in time to complain about his truck.
It might still be okay.
After probably all having to cram into the mystery machine, they eventually make it to the mayor's spooky-looking mansion, and are immediately greeted by this motherfucker, who we will definitely mention more later on, and who leads them to a waiting room. A waiting room that just so happens to contain 4 man-eating monster chairs that spring to life and attack the gang. It was at this moment that I realized just how out of place the Scooby Doo characters feel in this whole situation. Sure, the creepy atmosphere is a staple of classic Scooby Doo, but the antagonists and paranormal happenings in that series are usually always revealed to be a hoax. Within the continuity of this movie, right now they are probably expecting all of this to be faked somehow, like the countless times before. But we as the audience know who they're crossing over with, and that the only reveal regarding this stuff that they're gonna get is that this is all just straight up real this time. As the gang fights for their lives, they are then rescued by the mayor of nowhere, who sure is a character and a half as you'd probably expect. He basically straight up tells them that he doesn't know who the fuck they are, but invites them to dinner nonetheless. He also gives us the name of his butler from earlier. His name is Mr. Glockenspiel, and him and his wife, the mansion cook, came to work for him after leaving their previous workplace, a prison.
I hope.
Anyway, they eat, or at least try to. All this motherfucker served for dinner was some old, hard-as-hell, stale loaves of bread and water. The gang picks the mayor's brain regarding the oddities they've encountered, and he basically gives them the answer I've been yelling at the screen for the past 30 minutes. This is Courage the Cowardly Dog universe, bitch. Take your sensitive ass back to the fucking WWE or some shit. He does direct them to the museum wing of the mansion and promptly dips the fuck out of there. The group then splits up, with Fred, Velma, Daphne, and Muriel going to the museum, and the wild cards wandering off to siege the kitchen for some real food. As we enter the museum, one of my absolute favorite aspects of this entire movie is shown on full display. This mansion is absolutely chock full of references to Courage the Cowardly Dog's original run. These references include, but are certainly not limited to, the Velvet Vic record, Freaky Fred's electric razor, statues of Cats and LaQuack, Kitty's mask, Bigfoot appearing on the Nowhere flag, and the infamous King Ramses slab itself.
Return the slab.
They even come across a TV with a pre-recorded segment featuring even more direct references and a cameo from the news reporter, who you have no doubt heard before if you've watched the intro to literally any episode of the show. Quick cut to the mansion kitchen. Shaggy and Scoob are making a classic monstrous sandwich, and Eustace decides he's sick of all this shit and he just straight up leaves. Right in time, I guess, because that big-ass bug is back and chases them through the entire mansion. You can't have a good piece of Scooby-Doo content without a big, sorta unnecessary chase scene. I mean, come on. It ends with them stumbling into the museum, reuniting with the rest of the group for a brief moment before accidentally finding a secret passage to a cavern beneath the mansion. In this mysterious underground cavern, they discover the machine responsible for the sound that started this whole thing. But now it seems to be calibrated for humans and is broadcasting its signal to cell phone towers across the area. Anyone that is unlucky enough to pick up a phone call and hear the sound is effectively mind-controlled. At that very moment, Shaggy, Scooby, and Courage, who were roped into another chase scene while this revelation was made, fall through the floor, crushing the machine and probably any salvageable evidence. With everybody together again, they begin to notice another oddity. Whatever was powering the now busted machine was distorting gravity, causing them all to float. Velma exclaims that she is so close to an explanation and that she just needs a stable internet connection to do a bit more research to figure this all out. Muriel then points out that they have a computer at home, which made me audibly gasp. I had completely forgotten about Courage's computer. For those of you that don't know, Courage's possibly sentient, very knowledgeable computer is actually a pretty prominent recurring character from the show. Courage often consults the computer to learn what the supernatural threat is and what he must do to resolve the conflict. But for now, he's stuck in Courage's attic, and the gang is currently in a cave beneath a spooky mansion miles away. They do find a way out of the cave and decide that the anti-gravity just doesn't affect them anymore, I guess. That's probably not how that shit works. We then cut to Eustace, who made it home. He hears a knock at the door, and to his surprise, it's all the people who got mind-controlled before the machine was destroyed, and they have each brought a shit ton of money and valuables to this particular house. Eustace happily takes everything they offer without question or a single concern at all, other than probably the IRS. He then swims around in all his wealth. And I'm going to give you a quick second to guess what happens next, because I'm 100% sure that you won't get it. Got your guess? You ready? If you guessed that Eustace performs an entire musical number spoof of Straight Outta Compton called Straight Outta Nowhere, where he is shirtless, iced up, flexing on us, and twerking, I think, then boy, you are correct. What the fuck is this movie, dude? Back to the main group, after the necessary temptation of a Scooby snack, or in this case a Courage snack, they find themselves knee-deep in a cornfield that they must cross to get back to the house. A swarm of the cicadas then show up and begin abducting them, picking them off one by one. Velma makes sure to leave her tablet behind for them to finish her work. Shaggy gets so pumped up by the final lesson in their self-help book that he gives a big motivational speech, and then he is promptly snatched away as well, leaving just Courage and Scooby to get to the bottom of things. They make it back to the house, sneak past Scrooge McFuck, and waste no time getting to the computer. They plug Velma's tablet into it, and the two begin sharing data and having e-sex or something. Scoob is not into it. Anyway, the computer tells them that the farmhouse, the setting for the entire Courage the Cowardly Dog series, sits at the exact middle of the impact crater from the meteor that killed the dinosaurs. What still exists of the meteor is said to be right underneath them, and oh yes, it's composed of dark matter. It is heavily implied that this meteor is not only what was powering that machine from earlier, but also the reason as to why Nowhere is so prone to supernatural activity. They break one of the first rules of Minecraft and start digging straight down, eventually falling into a cave containing the meteor and confirming that the cicadas were harnessing its power. When they attempt to steal it, it causes a ton of wacky animation changes, transformations, and various shenanigans, all while an original song plays. The second of which, or maybe third, I guess, in this movie. Yeah, that intro at the beginning also had a different original song made for it. Even more shockingly, they're both actually pretty good. Seriously, for a direct-to-DVD movie, they have no right being as good as they are. During this sequence, they free their friends and are almost able to successfully get the meteor to the surface before the big cicada returns and takes Muriel hostage once again. In the climax of this movie, Courage is able to slip through a crack in the ground with the meteor in hand to go save the person that once saved his life and always showed him love and compassion. He leaves the mystery gang behind to literally contribute nothing to the rest of the movie, by the way. Courage harnesses the meteor to basically give himself superpowers, saving Muriel from a fall to her death and proceeding to have a Godzilla fight with the cicada. The battle ends when Courage tries to hide in their windmill, which the cicada destroys, but Courage uses the meteor to shrink the cicada and build a cage out of the debris of the broken windmill, which is sorta kind of a plot hole, maybe. It's revealed in an episode of Courage the Cowardly Dog that if that windmill ever stops turning, a group of 4 ancient Germanic skeleton warriors fucking attack the house. So technically speaking, those guys should be here beating on everyone's ass right now. Anyways, they unmask the cicada monster and it's none other than the mayor. And the mayor is also unmasked to reveal it's actually Katz and LeQuack, two classic Courage antagonists. So to recap, the 7-foot-tall bug was really the mayor of nowhere, who was actually a puppet controlled by two separate anthropomorphic conspirators with the plan to harness a meteor to mind control people to bring loads of money to Courage's house where they would steal it later. Why they needed to go through the effort of getting themselves elected mayor to pull this off, I have no clue. Oh yeah, those Glockenspiel people show up again and reveal they were two pre-existing military men characters from the original show. They arrest Katz and LeQuack, confiscate the dark matter meteor to make a nuke out of it or something. They all have a dance party, and that's the movie. Okay, time for my thoughts on this very, very interesting specimen of a movie. First, let's go over what I liked. The voice acting was absolutely amazing from all parties involved. I could tell everyone really gave it their all. This movie sadly marks the final acting performance from Thea White, the voice of Muriel. She passed away a short time before its release, and likely never got to see the official reappearance of a character I can tell she had a lot of passion and pride for voicing. Her sweet voice was definitely a highlight of this movie. I'd also like to say that I enjoyed a lot of the story elements in this movie, and I can honestly say that I did enjoy it. It's good, but it could have been better. Time for my gripes, my sorta criticisms for this film. Firstly, the fact that the creator of Courage the Cowardly Dog was actually not involved in this at all, which isn't inherently a bad thing. The movie still turned out okay, but it just puts a sour taste in my mouth. We don't know why he wasn't involved. He doesn't have a controversies tab in his Wikipedia article, so it's probably nothing like that. I can imagine him picking up the phone for a Courage the Cowardly Dog revival and hanging up once they started talking Scooby to him. The biggest thing that stuck out to me throughout every viewing of this movie, the thing that I just couldn't stop thinking about, was the fact that this really is first and foremost a Courage the Cowardly Dog movie. So much so that the Scooby Doo formula is barely even able to shine through. So the big question is, other than for obvious marketing and gimmick purposes, why wasn't this just a Courage the Cowardly Dog movie? Like, seriously, what the fuck were these people doing here? I remember back in 2019, I think, Netflix put out revival movies for two classic Nickelodeon cartoons, Rocko's Modern Life and Invader Zim. From my memory at least, they were pretty good. I recall enjoying both of them quite a bit. But most importantly, the concept of them even existing made me so excited for the future of this type of content. Beloved cartoons of the past didn't always get proper endings, thanks to the way the industry was and still kinda is. So what an amazing opportunity it is to give creators and fans alike a feature-length amount of time to revisit these universes. But sadly, these films didn't take off like I thought they would, like I hoped they would. Which sucks because I think this would have been a perfect opportunity for that. I think this movie could have been so much more solid as a standalone Courage revival. I mean, even so much here would have been good for that. The Katz and LeQuack mayor thing is pretty good. Revealing the source of the supernatural stuff is pretty good. Hell, the final battle with Courage overcoming his fear and battling the main antagonist is literally the perfect send-off for the character. I mean, just switch the meteor with a curse or something, and the bugs with something a little more creepy and in line with the show. My main point being that despite how charming it is, Scooby is what is holding this film back in a lot of ways. I don't really like the duality that has become so prominent these days when it comes to reviewing things. Like the thought process of something has to be amazing, otherwise it's disappointing and terrible. I think that is really stupid. Things can be good. This movie is good. Overall, I'm glad it exists. But I can also admit that I think that under different circumstances, it could have been great. And a truly amazing send-off for a very brave pink dog. I want to thank you so much for watching. It really means the most to me. I definitely think that if you're a Courage the Cowardly Dog or Scooby Doo fan, you should definitely go check out this movie for yourself. You can add it to your Halloween watch list or something. Yeah, this is a sort of my Halloween special for this year. So if you're watching it during Halloween time, happy Halloween. I hope you have an awesome Halloween. If you enjoyed this video, definitely go check out my other content. I have quite a few other review recap style videos covering various topics, along with a lot of other stuff. I do quite the variety. But that's all for me for now. I hope you have an absolutely amazing day, and I'll see you in the next one.
I want some cheeseburgers just to eat. I'm talking ketchup, my nigga mustard on the beat. You gotta put a lot of lettuce, please, because I like to have a lot of grease. I remember eating outside with my whole team. Now a nigga gotta stay home cause of quarantine.
Popped a perk 30, got straight to